We're on chapter 19, starting in section 1. So we're going to go ahead and get started with this. This is the last chapter for the year. So we've made it here to the end. This is the last chapter. After the Black Death, the economy in Europe began to grow. Obviously, people quit dying. That helps. Trade with Asia began to grow as well, and this allowed them to get more goods, and it allowed the Silk Road to reopen. So the Silk Road is going to reopen at this time. Of course, here's a map of the Silk Road. When the Roman Empire and the Han Dynasty fell, the Silk Road had originally closed. In the 1200s, the Mongols took over China. And this is going to be the time when Marco Polo, which we've already talked about, is going to travel to China. Marco Polo is an Italian merchant. The Polos traveled from Europe to China, where they saw a lot of amazing things, such as paper, money, and coal used for fuel. So when Marco Polo stayed in China 20 years, when he returned home, he met a writer that basically helped him write about some of his adventures. Now, a lot of people argue that some of this stuff may not be real, that it may be fabrications. Either way, if what Marco Polo said he saw wasn't real, he did inspire a whole generation of explorers to search out and try to explore in the same way that he did, including Christopher Columbus. So that's just kind of part of it. There's a timeline of the different events. You can look at that if you want to pause and look at it. And so we're moving in now to the Medici family of Italy and kind of the rise of Florence, Italy as a trade destination. By the 1300s, Florence, Genoa, Milan, and Venice all became trading centers. Italian cities were huge during this time, which is ironic because it was Genoa that the plague really started in. Italian merchant families became extremely wealthy. Florence stands out as one of the greatest trade cities in Italy. Florence, Alabama is actually named after Florence, Italy, because of the large amounts of water surrounding the city. Banking was a big business in Florence, with Florence bankers having money from merchants all over Europe. They would make money from interest. This is how banks work. They collect interest, and they use that to collect capital for that bank. Medici is the greatest of Florence bankers. This is a family's last name. The head of their family is Cosimo de' Medici, who was the head of the Medici family in 1434. Cosimo realized the importance of education, and he worked to improve education by building libraries and collecting books. He believed that by collecting these things, by growing a library, that he would expand education. The Renaissance, which I told you is where we're going to end this year, is what we're going to start talking about now. Renaissance means rebirth. It was the rebirth of interest in art and literature. It was the rebirth in taking some of these Greek and Roman ideas and giving them more life. The individual was also celebrated for individuality under the Renaissance. New ways of thinking went along with it, which gave the rise to the Renaissance a unique artistic flair. During this, most scholars devoted themselves to religious studies, but that would change during this time. During the Middle Ages, that's what they focused on. Remember, we talked about in chapter 17 about the rise of monks and kind of dedicating themselves to the faith and things like that. A lot of the artwork and stuff was dedicated to religion during this time. During this period of the Renaissance, you're going to develop more of a humanistic belief, ways of thinking and learning that stresses the importance of human abilities and actions. It moves away from a religious center and more towards a human center. This is going to also lead up to the Enlightenment, where you're going to see a lot of scientific and advancements that comes out of this period as people start looking more towards science and less towards religion. The interest in the humanities was linked to the discovery of ancient writings. These writings were Greek and Latin texts from classical thinkers, and it made the Italians long for a revival of classic culture. Basically, it made them sit back and say, hey, we want things to be like this. This was an artistic dream. Artists and architects were also drawn to the past. They would look at this stuff and they would read the literature and they would look at the artwork and they would want to emulate that or model themselves after that. A few Italian writers. The first one is Dante Alighieri, which is the politician and poet that wrote the Divine Comedy, which is based in 3 parts. The most well-known is Dante's Inferno, which is the story of Dante as he descends down to hell to basically take a tour of hell, you could say. And he looks at the different levels of hell, and from that's where he bases the Dante's Inferno from. You also have Niccolo Machiavelli, which wrote The Prince. This is a quote from Dante. The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. And so this is both of a political and an artistic statement here about how there's basically a special place in hell for people who stay neutral when there's morality, there's crises in morality going on. We're going to talk now about Machiavelli for a few minutes. He was a writer and a politician. He was concerned about what might be what will actually happen in the past. He was an example of a Renaissance interest in human behavior and society. He wanted to look at what happened in the past and build off that, have the foundation of what happened in the past and kind of add to that. This is a quote from The Prince. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. And so anyone who watches The Office is probably familiar with a quote from Michael Scott that says, would I rather be feared or loved? Both. I want people to fear how much they love me. So, and that's based off of this quote from Machiavelli. During the Renaissance, Italian artists create beautiful sculptures and paintings. The artists show people more realistically than in other time periods. A lot of the Greek stuff was based looked like Greek gods, and a lot of that still happens during the Renaissance, but they made people more realistic facial features and things like that. The artist developed a new technique called perspective that showed depth and distance on a flat surface. It's the way that we get dimensions in artwork where you see shadows and different things like that. There were multiple great artists during the Renaissance, but the biggest were Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Michelangelo designed buildings, wrote poetry, and was a sculptor. Leonardo da Vinci was an architect, an inventor, a map maker, and a sculptor. And so we see here's Michelangelo and Leonardo, not the artist, but the Ninja Turtles, named after them. Because according to the story of the Ninja Turtles, their master Splinter had a deep love of artwork and named the turtles after the artist. This is one of Michelangelo's greatest works. This is the sculpture of David, representing the Jewish king David, and this is one of the greatest pieces of artwork that Michelangelo came up with. This is Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, which is another very important piece of artwork that was created by Leonardo da Vinci. And that brings us to the end of section 1.